Alright, Soulslike fans! If you're the type who runs toward danger instead of away from it, then you're gonna love what Wuchang Fallen Feathers has in store. This game doesn't just drop you into a haunting world inspired by Ming Dynasty-era China, it also pits you against some of the most creatively twisted bosses you've seen outside of a fever dream. We're talking about monsters that look like they crawled out of a nightmare and brought their entire backstory with them. And the best part? These aren't just weird for weird's sake. Their designs actually hint at their combat styles and personalities. Pretty cool, right? Now, of course, not every boss is a knockout in the looks department. Some just do their job and move on. But there are a few, and you'll know them when you see them, that are pure visual gold. They're intimidating, stylish, and just the right amount of unsettling. So in this video, we're diving into the best boss designs Wuchang Fallen Feathers has to offer. Let's break down what makes these particular enemies stand out and why they're going to be burned into your memory long after you finally take them down. I'm quickly moving on to the video. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching. Now, let's talk about one of the most disturbing bosses in Wuchang Fallen Feathers, the Blight Weaver. If you have even the slightest fear of bugs, especially centipedes, this one is going to haunt your dreams. The design feels like something pulled straight out of a Resident Evil nightmare, complete with oversized limbs, disfigured flesh, and weapons that look like they were stolen from a medieval torture chamber. It is not just a monster, it is a walking warning sign that screams, "Turn back now." What makes the Blight Weaver so memorable is the way it mixes body horror with brutal functionality. You are not just fighting a grotesque creature, you are fighting a killing machine. Its body is covered in blades, spikes, and those two terrifying cleavers that can tear through anything in their path. It has a whole collection of arms twisted around its torso like some kind of cursed bouquet, and each one looks like it was designed to kill in a different way. You can tell this boss was made to leave an impression, both on your mind and your health bar. But the real kicker? There is actually a human host emerging from the top of the centipede's body. That detail takes the design from gross to deeply unsettling. It is a smart way to show the effects of the feathering disease, how it does not just infect the body but completely warps it into something monstrous. The dangling limbs, the stretched skin, and the visible suffering on the host's face all drive home how far gone this creature really is. Overall, the Blight Weaver is a standout because it is not just scary. It is creatively scary. It tells a story just through its design. You can look at it and instantly get a sense of what kind of nightmare world you are dealing with in Wuchang Fallen Feathers. It is not just a boss fight. It is a full-on horror set piece, and easily one of the best designed bosses in the game. Liu Chengyan might not be the most monstrous-looking boss in Wuchang Fallen Feathers, but that does not make him any less terrifying. His design walks a really fine line between elegance and horror, and honestly, that makes him stand out even more. At first glance, you can tell this is a man who once held serious authority. The armor, the stance, the way he moves, oh, everything about him screams Ming Dynasty General. But then you notice the pale, almost ghostly skin, and suddenly the image starts to twist. It is like you're staring at a warrior pulled straight from the grave. What really sells Liu Chengyan's design is how much story is packed into it without a single line of dialogue. Those giant feathered ornaments on his back are more than just flair. They tie him to his roots, his culture, and probably his sense of honor. It is almost like he is still clinging to the image of the man he used to be, even though everything else about him has decayed. It is a beautiful but unsettling contrast. The traditional elements give him this sense of pride, while the undead-like appearance reminds you he is far removed from the man he once was. And then there is his face, expressionless, emotionless, and completely devoid of life. The dead stare in his eyes alone is enough to put anyone on edge. There is something deeply unnerving about a boss who just watches you with that cold, blank gaze as he prepares to cut you down. It gives off the impression that he is driven by something other than human will, like revenge or duty that has outlived his own mortality. You do not need a cutscene to know he has a tragic past. It is all right there, written in his face. What makes Liu Chengyan such a memorable boss is not just the fight itself, but how much personality comes through in the design. The developers could have taken the easy route and made him just another ghostly soldier, but instead they gave him depth, balance, and cultural significance. He feels like a true product of the world of Wuchang Fallen Feathers. Someone shaped by both history and the horrors that followed. A haunting reminder that not all monsters are born monstrous. Let us just take a moment to talk about one of the creepiest bosses in Wuchang Fallen Feathers, the monstrous toddler. The name alone is enough to make you pause, but once you actually lay eyes on this thing, it is pure nightmare fuel. This boss looks like something that clawed its way out of a cosmic horror tale. It is not big and dramatic in the usual sense, but what it lacks in size, it more than makes up for in sheer psychological terror. One glance at that face, or more accurately, the gaping hole where its face should be, and you know you are in for a deeply unsettling encounter. What makes the monstrous toddler so disturbing is how much of its design is rooted in subtle human elements that have been twisted into something unnatural. The long, matted gray hair hanging from its head hints at a past life, maybe even innocence, but it has been warped into a visual of pure horror. It is like you are fighting something that was once a child, corrupted and transformed into a weapon of terror. That kind of storytelling, done purely through design, is impressive and chilling all at once. And then you notice the weapons, those long, jagged, spiked blades protruding from its arms. They are not clean or elegant. They look brutal and painful, as if they were forged out of suffering itself. The monstrous toddler uses them with ferocity, slicing through the air and forcing players to stay on their toes throughout the entire encounter. The way it moves, the way it attacks, even the screeches it lets out. Everything about this boss screams danger, but in a way that feels much more personal and grotesque than your typical oversized brute. What is really special about this boss is that it does not need to be flashy or exaggerated to leave an impression. Its horror lies in its simplicity. The broken human elements, the eerie silence, the malformed body. It is the kind of enemy that stays with you long after the fight is over simply because of how unsettling it is. The monstrous toddler might not be the biggest or most complex boss in the game, but in terms of raw creep factor, it is easily one of the most memorable in Wuchang Fallen Feathers. The Fierce Tiger Sovereign is a perfect example of how Wuchang Fallen Feathers manages to take something familiar and twist it just enough to make it terrifying. Tigers on their own are already intense, powerful, agile, and commanding fear without needing any supernatural upgrades, but the developers clearly wanted to push that fear factor even further. What we get instead is something that looks like it clawed its way out of a cursed grave, dragging centuries of rage and rot with it. It still looks like a tiger, but just wrong. What makes this design so effective is how it keeps that balance between majestic and monstrous. From a distance, the tiger's gleaming fur and piercing gaze make it seem almost noble, like a forgotten guardian of the forest. But then you get closer, and you notice the decayed flesh around its jaw, the clawed hands that are half bone, and the way its mouth stretches far wider than it should. It is not just a predator anymore. It is a corpse brought back to hunt, and that concept alone brings a whole new layer of fear to the fight. Even though the Fierce Tiger Sovereign is not as massive as some of the other bosses in the game, its movements are fast, wild, and brutally effective. One of the standout moments is when it lets out that blood-curdling scream with its jaw unhinged to an impossible width. It is a great use of the creature's design in the actual mechanics of the fight. You are not just fighting a beast, you are up against something that should not exist, and that tension is felt in every swipe and roar. Sure, part of me wonders what it would have looked like if the developers leaned even harder into the decayed aesthetic. More torn flesh, exposed ribs, that sort of thing. But honestly, the balance they struck works really well. It still resembles a tiger enough to be instantly recognizable, while the corrupted elements give it just the right amount of otherworldly dread. It is a bold and smart design that shows off Wuchang Fallen Feathers' knack for horror without losing touch with the game's cultural and mythical roots. The Feathered Priest is one of those bosses in Wuchang Fallen Feathers that immediately makes you stop and ask, what happened to this guy? Unlike some of the other monstrous creatures you face, this one clearly used to be human. And not just any human, but a respected religious figure. That makes his current state all the more disturbing. Covered head to toe in bright red, bubbling flesh, his entire body looks like it is in a constant state of mutation, as if the feathering disease is still actively corrupting him in real time. What really stands out is that massive golden mask hiding what is left of his face. It is ornate, almost ceremonial, but on this hulking figure, it just makes everything more unsettling. The fact that he still carries a staff, one that is twice his size, ties him back to the person he once was, which makes his transformation even more tragic. There is something powerful about seeing remnants of a past identity buried under layers of horror, and the developers clearly leaned into that with this design. And then there are the glowing red eyes, easily one of the most chilling features in the whole game. They do not just look scary, they feel like a mechanic. The way they cut through fog, through darkness, and seem to track you no matter where you run creates this constant sense of pressure. Even before you actually start the fight, just seeing the feathered priest lurking in the distance, with those eyes staring you down, is enough to make your palms sweat. It is psychological horror through and through. Overall, the feathered priest is a masterclass in how to design a boss that feels both tragic and terrifying. You are not just fighting a monster, you are facing what is left of a man who once led others, now twisted beyond recognition. His appearance tells a whole story without needing a single word, and it perfectly captures the dark, corrupted atmosphere that Wuchang Fallen Feathers does so well. This is not just another boss fight. It is a confrontation with what the world has become. The Perfect Bride. Chimera is one of those bosses in Wuchang Fallen Feathers that grabs your attention the second she steps into view. She does not charge at you like a beast or roar in some grotesque fashion. Instead, she simply appears, elegant and composed, wrapped in flowing red cloth that looks more ceremonial than battle-ready. But the moment you notice the dual blades at her side and the blood dripping from the bandages over her eyes, it becomes crystal clear. This is not a graceful figure. This is a walking nightmare in disguise. Her design is a brilliant blend of beauty and horror. There is something haunting about the way she carries herself. Silent, graceful, almost like a bride waiting for a wedding that never came. But then you start noticing the smaller details. The blood from beneath the bandages, the way her movements seem calculated, like she can see you without seeing. And the worst part? That massive demonic entity sprouting from her back. It is not just decoration. It is alive, looming over her like a twisted guardian, silently judging every move you make. What really makes this boss fight memorable is the constant sense of duality. On one side, you have the swordswoman, deadly, skilled, human. On the other, a supernatural parasite that makes her more than human, and definitely less than sane. You are not just fighting her, you are fighting them. The demon on her back becomes an active part of the battle, almost as if it is whispering commands or feeding off her hatred. It is an incredible piece of visual storytelling that ties in beautifully with the tone of the game. In the end, the Perfect Bride Chimera stands out not because she is the biggest or most violent boss, but because her horror is intimate. You feel like you are staring into the face of someone who once had purpose, beauty, and humanity, now twisted into a vessel for something much darker. The contrast between elegance and evil makes her one of the most striking and effective boss designs in Wuchang Fallen Feathers, and definitely one you will not forget anytime soon. Feathery Ambition, the final form of Xuanyangzi, is a jaw-dropping display of how far Wuchang Fallen Feathers is willing to go with its boss designs. And honestly, it could not be a more fitting end to the journey. As the final boss, you expect something grand, something menacing, but what you get is something deeply wrong, a creature that feels like it was never meant to exist. His elongated neck and drooping, almost puppet-like arms immediately set the tone. This is not just a powerful enemy. It is a twisted symbol of what unchecked ambition and corruption can become. What really strikes you is the way his former humanity is still vaguely visible. You can tell, buried deep beneath the mass of wings, tendrils, and distorted limbs, there was a man. And that somehow makes it even scarier. The huge black wings bursting from his back should be majestic, maybe even divine, but in this context, they look more like a curse, spreading out like rotting feathers across the battlefield. It is a bold design that manages to blend tragedy and monstrosity in a single silhouette, and then you look closer and the horror just keeps unfolding. Sharp, root-like spikes pierce out from his torso, tangled in with squirming tentacles that seem to move with a life of their own. The entire body feels like it is in a constant state of transformation, as if whatever Xuanyangzi has become is still growing, still mutating. It is pure body horror at its finest, the kind that makes your skin crawl not because it is violent, but because it feels wrong. Every movement, every twitch, adds to the feeling that you're fighting something that broke every law of nature to exist. What makes Feathery Ambition truly unforgettable, though, is how it embodies everything the game has been building toward. The cost of power, the decay of humanity, and the chaos left in the wake of ambition run wild. This is not just a final boss. It is the final statement of the game's world and themes. And when the battle is over and the credits roll, the image of Xuanyangzi, wings outstretched, body broken and bizarre, will stick with you. Not just because of how hard the fight was, but because of how deeply disturbing and beautifully designed the creature is. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.